Good morning and welcome to Monday's Maths. So this week we're going to be doing all about percentages. So today we're going to start looking at equivalence between fractions, decimals, percentages, converting between all of those. Tomorrow we're then going to start looking at doing fractions of amounts. And then the rest of the week is going to be more problem solving. So trying to find missing values and thinking about if something increases or decreases by a percentage, how much would it be worth them? So by Friday, we'll be in our Power Maths books doing the worksheets in there. Right, let's get started. So what does percentage mean? I want you to take a minute and just think about what do we mean when we say percentage? Well, cent means 100. Think about things like a centipede or centimetre. There's 100 centimetres in a metre. There's 100 years in a century. There's 100 legs on a centipede. So cent means 100. So per cent means out of 100, for every 100. So if we're talking about 100%, we are talking about 100 out of 100. If we're talking about 50%, we're talking about 50 out of 100 because percent means out of 100. So if we think about this in the real world for a moment, think about if I said to you, right, we've got a test, we did a test today and you got 100%. If you get 100% of something, you've got the whole thing. So if you got 100% on a test, you got the whole thing right. Let's say you were eating some chocolates and you ate 50%. If you ate 50% of those chocolates, you ate 50 out of those 100 parts, or 50 out of 100. So you ate 50 of those chocolates, you ate half of those chocolates. If you got 0% on something, so say again we did a test and you got 0%, that means you didn't get any of it right, okay? Because you didn't get anything, you got 0%. Now, this all sounds pretty easy, but what you've got to think about is that sometimes we do a test and it's not out of 100. It might be out of 10, it might be out of 20, it might be out of 30. So then how do you work out a percentage? Because if it's out of 10 and percentage means out of 100, how do you get a percentage then? How does that work? And that's what we're going to have a look at now. So we did a test, a spelling test, and you got 4 out of 10. Oh dear, not your best spelling test, but that's okay. We can always practice. How can we turn this into a percentage? Well, like we were saying before, percent means out of 100. So we need to make it so that it's got 100 parts. So what do I want to make my denominator then? If I want to make it have 100 parts, well, I want to make it 100. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find an equivalent fraction to 4/10 with 100 as the denominator. So what did I times my denominators by? Well, I times that by 10. So what have I got to times my numerator by then to find the equivalent fraction? I need to times it by 10, which would be 40 out of 100. So if that test had been out of 100, you would have got 40 of those right. Okay, it's a little bit like ratio in that we're keeping these ratios the same. We're just making the quantity bigger. Right, how's that helped me then? How could that help me turn this into a percentage? If I know that 4/10 is the same as 40 hundredths, percent means out of 100, hopefully you're telling me that this is the same then as 40%. Right. Next week's test was out of 20. And oh dear, we only got 5. Definitely need to be practicing our spelling a little bit more. But it was out of 20. So same problem again. If I want it as a percentage, but it was out of 20, not 100, what am I going to do? Well, I need to make it out of 100. I need to find the equivalent fraction in hundredths. So what do I times 20 by to get to 100? Well, 2 times 5 is 10. So 20 times 5 is 100, making it 10 times bigger. So I times my numerator also by 5, which is 25. So 25 hundredths, what would that be as a percentage? Well, it's 25 out of 100, so it would be 25%. Pause your video and have a go at these. Hopefully your page looks a little bit like mine. So 6/10, I need to turn it into hundredths, so I multiply it all by 10, which would be 60 hundredths, which is 60%. For 8/50ths, to turn it into hundredths, I multiply it by 2, because 50 is half of 100. So I times it all by 2, which would be 16 hundredths. 16 out of 100 is the same as 16%. Well done if you got those right. Right, Hopefully now we're feeling confident with changing from fractions to percentages. So now we're going to have a look at changing from decimals to percentages. So eventually you'll probably get really good at this and you'll be able to do it in your head. But for now, I like to go from decimals to fractions and then to percentages. So we already know how to do this bit. So now we just need to remember how to do decimals to fractions, which we should be fine with. So if you look at 0.5, what column is this? This is the tenths column. So there are 5 tenths. So I can write this as a fraction as 5 over 10. 5 tenths. There are 5 tenths. Right. If I then want to turn this into a percentage, how do I turn 5 tenths into a percentage? Well, I need to make it out of 100. So I need to times this, not divide, times this by 10, which means times in this by 10, which is then 50 over 100, which is what as a percentage? 50%. Lovely. So the quicker way to do this, when you can kind of start doing this in your head, is thinking about if this is your tenths column and this is your hundredths column, what goes here? Well, what goes here would be a 0 because putting that 0 there does not change my number. So what would this be as a fraction? It would be 50 hundredths, just like we had over here, because we know that all of this is equivalent. 50 hundredths is the same as 50%. Okay, next one, converting decimals to percentages. So I've got 0.08. How could I write this as a fraction? Well, this 8 is in the hundredths column and there isn't any tenth, so it's 8 hundredths. How would I write this as a percentage then? It would just be 8%. Okay, have a go at working these two out. So pause the video, have a go, and then we'll go through the answers. Answer time. Hopefully your page looks a little bit like mine. So 0.49 is the same as 49 hundredths. 49 out of 100 equals 49%. Right, for the next one is 0.7. So 0.7 is the same as 7 tenths. Turn that into hundredths would be 70 hundredths, which would be 70%. To prove it, I can put a 0 in my hundredths column. So I've got 0.70, which is the same as 70 hundredths, which is the same as 70%. Well done if you got those right. Okay, we're now going to have a go at just learning some equivalent fractions, decimals, and percentages, ones that you just know when you look at them. So we're going to have a bit of a go at a matching up activity. So I want you to try and match up the percentage to the fraction to the decimal. First of all, you might need to work them out just like we've been doing before. You might want to start with the decimal and then the fraction. You might want to start with the fraction, whichever way you want to do it. So we're going to start by working them out, and then hopefully by the end of this, you'll be able to do this kind of in your heads and you'll get to know these straight away. So to begin with then, I'm going to start with the percentages and have a look at what they match to. So 100% is the same as saying 100 out of 100 or the whole thing. So there's the fraction that it matches to. Is that the same as 0.1, 0.01 or 1 whole? Well, it's the same as 1 whole. So that one I've matched up straight away. Right, next ones. Now I'm going to look at 10%. So 10% is 10 out of 100. So I'm looking for 10 over 100. Oh, that isn't an option. 10 over 100 isn't an option. Which one of these, though, is equivalent to 10 hundredths? This one is, because if you times them both by 10, you would have 10 hundredths. So these two are equivalent. 10 hundredths, or 1/10, as it was, is the same as 0.1, because this is 1/10, and if I put a 0 there, it would be 10 hundredths. So the last one then, let's check I'm right. 1% is the same as 1 out of 100, and 1/100th is written as 0.01. Okay, same activity again, but different numbers. So I need to try and match up the percentage to the fraction to the decimal. Hopefully you know some of these, and if you do know them, brilliant. Can you explain why? Okay, why is that equivalent to that? Pause the video and have a go. Right, answer time. So if I start 25%, that's the same as 25 out of 100. Ooh, that's not an option here though. So 25 over 100. If I simplified this, what would I get? Well, if I divide them both by 25, it would be 1 over 4. 1/4, because 25 is a quarter of 100. 25, 50, 75, 100. If you times 25 by 4, you get 100. So this is equivalent to a quarter. Perfect. Right, decimal wise, this is actually really easy because 25% is the same as 25 hundredths. So this one then is equivalent to 0.25. Next one then, 50%. So 50% is the same as 50 over 100. So that should hopefully tell me my decimal quite easily. There isn't a fraction of 50 over 100 though, so let's simplify it. Let's divide them both by 50, which will be 1/2, because 50 is half of 100. If you had 50% of something, you would have half of it. So this is equivalent to 1/2. And the decimal that it's equivalent to is 0.5, because this is the same as 50 hundredths or 5/10, and this is also equivalent to 5/10. And the last one then, let's check we were right. 75% is the same as 75 over 100. If you divide them all by 25, 25, 50, 75, 3, divide 100 by 25, 25, 50, 75, 104. So this is equivalent to 3/4, and 75 hundredths is written as 0.75. Right, well done if you got those right. I now want you to just cover the screen up and practice which one's equivalent to 25%, which one's equivalent to 75%. See if you can remember these, and then when you've done, uncover the screen. Yes, I got that one right. What's that one equivalent to as a fraction? What's that equivalent to as a decimal? I'm going to test you in a minute, so pause this video and have a quick practice. Number 1, what is 50% as a fraction? Answer, 50 hundredths or a half. Hopefully you're saying a half. Okay, we need to know that 50% is the same as a half. Number 2, what is 1/4 as a decimal? 1/4 is the same as 0.25. What is 1/10 as a percentage? 1/10 is the same as 10%, because 1/10 would be the same as 10 hundredths, which is 10%. Right, last little bit before we go on to your Hegarty. So hopefully these fractions and decimals are starting to get into your head and you're starting to remember them. Right, last little bit then. So 20% is the same as 0.2, 40% is 0.4, 60% is 0.6, and 80% is 0.8. What would these be as fractions? This is the last equivalency that you need to know, you need to remember, okay? So this is the same as 2/10 or 20 hundredths. It doesn't really matter, they're both equivalent. 2/10, if you simplified it, is the same as 1/5. So 1/5 is the same as 20%. 1/5 is equivalent to 20%, because 20 is a fifth of 100. If you divide 100 by 5, you would get 20. So if 20% is 1/5, 40% is 2/5. If 20% is 1/5, 40% is 2/5, 60% is 3/5. So what's 80% then? 4/5. And then 100% would be 5/5, because that then makes the whole. Again, pause this video, see if you can remember them. Well done if you followed all of that. That is really, really good work. So well done. Right, last little bit then. Hegarty maths, you can either do 82 or 83, or of course you can always do both. So 82 is fractions to percentages and 83 is involving decimals. So whichever one you want to think you need more practice at, I'd probably say 83, but if you want to do 82 as well, that's amazing. Right, see you later.